Okay, well, I did not get the pep talk about having a tame reading, so I hope we're okay with some gore this evening. My name's Jess Hagemann. I'm going to be reading from my new book, Mother Eating. If anybody in the audience is a history buff, you might recognize this illustration on the front as an interpretation of a real political cartoon that circulated about Marie Antoinette in the 1700s. So Marie Antoinette was the Queen of France, of course, and she was married off at 14 to King Louis. And in my book, which updates her story for this century, she gets married off by her mom at 14 to the leader of a cult in Austin. And that cult worships Simon Magus, which is a character in the Christian Bible, and they're called Simon Sorrow, and they practice a ritual called restoration. So that's where we're going to jump in this evening. I'd never seen someone react as strongly to death as Mary Tony did. All of us grow up knowing death is a fact of life, but some of us have more trouble accepting that fact, I guess. I mean, sure, I was shocked the first time we sacrificed an egg too, but the way King Louis explained it afterward, I believed restoration was necessary. Clearly, he hadn't explained it that well to Mary Tony yet, who'd only been with us a couple years. She was still being initiated into the church's mysteries, getting to know its philosophical underpinnings, if you will. We were in the basement and gathered around an older male egg. Madame du Barry had fitted him with a scold's bridle, a steel helmet with an iron muzzle. The muzzle featured a metal tongue depressor a few inches long that went inside the egg's mouth and held his tongue down, leaving him unable to speak. Another one rested just beneath his jaw, further immobilizing his head. From what I could gather, this particular egg was a radio show host who'd recently spoken out against Simon Sorrow. But speak no more could he. Only well after the egg had been drugged, abducted, and locked in the bridle did King Louis enter the room. We stopped the orgy in progress, which was meant, if another sash hasn't explained this yet, to concentrate our individual life energies and act like a kind of beacon for the spirit, and turned to face him. King Louis then stepped aside, revealing Anoia, and we fell at once to our knees, prostrating ourselves before her, that our collective life force might nourish her and prepare her womb for the air. She was always quiet, always. I liked that about her. She took things in, turned them over in her mind, formed her own opinions, never blurting out the first thing to pop into her head. It made her seem smart, like the Mother of God should be. It made her seem patient, careful, caring. So when King Louis stepped aside and she saw across the room the icebox, recognizing it no doubt as the room she'd initially been held prisoner in, saw the egg, saw all of our naked bodies, smelled the blood and the iron and the incense, she didn't scream or faint or anything else you might expect a queen to do. She absorbed it, her eyes wide in the dim light. And when King Louis took her hand to let her know it was all okay, she gripped it, the hand of this strange older man, her husband, the king, and accepted what she saw to the extent that her mind could rationalize it, initially anyway. King Louis motioned for her to take a seat on the stone bench. One of the sashes immediately brought a cushion for her to sit upon. King Louis then walked over to the egg and addressed him directly. "We are on this planet, in these incarnations for such a short time," King Louis began. He sounded solemn, almost sad. "Our only responsibility while here is to help each other prepare for what comes next." King Louis turned toward the sashes. "And how do we do that, brothers and sisters?" "We only speak the truth to one another," the maid said. "Well, how do we know it's true?" "We read the Book of Simon," the tattooist answered. "We go to church. We work hard, honest work that honors God. And we practice restoration, that the body might learn to recognize truth, separate it and honor it as wheat from the clouding chaff." Satisfied, King Louis returned his attention to the egg. "You, my friend, are so very, very lucky. For although you've been speaking lies, we know it's not your fault. You were simply repeating what others had told you, those who would spread falsehoods about Simon Sorrow, about Simon himself. At this, grumbles of anger rumbled through the room, because they're scared. Scared of what they don't know, of what they do not understand. In your ignorance, you amplified that misplaced fear. Misplaced, King Louis clarified, because there are real evils, real demons to be afraid of, but they do not reside at Simon Sorrow. They live inside the minds and hearts of those who, upon learning the truth, choose ignorance anyway. Those who knowingly confuse the path of righteousness with the path of self-righteousness and keep walking it because it's comfortable, because it does not. And here, King Louis looked at those in turn who'd spoken earlier, require hard work, does not require speaking truth, the terrible, liberating, all-powerful truth to one another, because it's easier, hisses throughout the room, not right, but easier, to willingly mistake one's own personal, limited, puny experience for the universal experience, the reality behind the veil. King Louis whipped back around to the egg. But I said you were lucky, and you are, because tonight we will raise that veil for you. May it never again cloud your vision. He nodded at the guard. Without further ado, the guard grabbed and turned a metal crank atop the steel helmet. As he wound the crank, it lowered a concave iron plate, a rounded skull cap, inside the helmet, which soon made contact with the egg's scalp. He kept winding. The plate kept lowering, and the egg started screaming. The pressure applied to and building inside his skull must have been excruciating. Watching, Mary Tony whimpered from the bench. "Stop," she finally shouted, the first word she'd spoken all night. Everyone except for King Louis looked at her. Suddenly self-conscious, she seemed to shrink beneath our gaze. But the egg kept screaming and her eyes flicked back to him. She clapped her hands over her ears, still staring in horror. "Stop, stop, stop it," she screamed. When the egg's eyes popped out of their sockets, one bursting like a Cadbury cream egg at Easter time, the other a dangling wet grape, she squeezed her own eyes shut, as though by refusing to look at a thing, she could make that thing not real. But that's what those who propagate lies do, and not a fitting response for the queen. Almost as if she understood that fact, and gathering a strength that none of us until that moment knew she possessed, she leapt from the bench and rushed at the guard. She tried to pull his hands from the crank, but she was a small 16, and he a grown man. King Louis ran to her, intending, I thought, to strike her for her insolence. In a move that surprised all of us, however, he embraced her, folding her struggling arms into the safety net of his chest, his head coming to rest upon the top of her shaking, sweaty head, at once containing her and comforting her, demonstrating a foreign type of mercy at Simon Sorrow. Pity. It didn't matter that King Louis had ordered the egg's death, that he'd brought Mary Tony down to witness the sacrifice herself. He held her so long that eventually she gave in to his hug, stopped fighting, felt steadied by the heartbeat of her husband, her oppressor, our savior. None of us, I don't think, breathed for 5 minutes, aware we were witnessing something historic. It was quiet enough in the room for us to hear King Louis whispering to her, though I at least could not make out the words. Believing after a time that the storm had passed, he pulled back to look her in the eyes. When he did, she saw the egg again, saw the squashed mess of his head, how his jaw had been crushed, his teeth shattered, the way they stuck out from his face, through his cheeks, like borax crystals, sharp and glittery. And she wailed, a high, keening, solitary note that seemed to last forever. Even though the egg's head was the one we'd restored that evening, I wondered if maybe hers hadn't broken too, invisibly, in a manner we couldn't see. Deciding she'd had enough, King Louis gently steered her away from the bridle and the puddle inside it, and out of the basement entirely. The rest of us picked up right where we'd left off, completing the ritual, bringing each other closer to God.